The question that we want to look at today is Islam incompatible with modern times? Some would argue that religion as a whole, or particularly Islam, is incompatible with the times that we live in. And what they say is, with the passage of time, things change, times change, and with the changing times comes a need for a new type of guidance. In other words, therefore, a religion whose laws were revealed 1400 years ago today is really irrelevant and it's really obsolete. And they say that, you Muslims are against progress, and you want people to go back in time, go back in the Stone Age, and live how those people were living, and that you really need to start living in modern times to get a grip on reality, and be champions for progress. For the Muslim, however, Islam's teachings are eternal, for it's God who has revealed them, and He is the one who knows the past, the present, the future, and all the different conditions that human beings will face. That's not to say that human beings will not face situations that they haven't faced in the past, and we're going to get to that in a minute. But let's look at first our human values and our ethical standards. For the Muslim, the rules of God provide a frame of reference for him or her that do not change with the changing times and the changing civilizations. So for example, if God commands you not to steal, or not to murder, or not to give false testimony, not to be greedy, or not to be deceitful, that is valid today just as it was valid back then. Or if God commands you to help the needy, to be good to your parents, to speak with kind words, to be just, for example, that does not change over time, and that has to still be implemented, right? So our primary and our essential ethical standards, our human values, are the same, and they do not change. That is the belief of the Muslim. And in no way is that incompatible with modern times, right? To call people to these lofty values, to these type of standards. The Muslim wants to live in a world that has these values and that has these standards, and it is not against progress to call to these. Now that's part of the picture. Obviously, human beings will face situations that the people of the past did not face, and we all know this. And Islamic law has a built-in mechanism, what's called ijtihad, and which it's not a free and independent type of thinking or deduction of law. What it is using those foundational and original principles, those basic and foundational principles found within the Quran and found within the example of the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, in his life, and using those basic and foundational principles to deduce the rules of the law. However, those things that are basic and foundational, they don't change, right? Because they don't need to change over time. There are things that, there are principles that will be valid till the end of time. So the Islamic law can cater to the various different situations that we face as human beings, but our essential values, our essential standards will remain the same and will not change over time. So Islam is not calling people to live the way that civilizations 1400 years ago lived. That's not the case. And we have to differentiate between what we call civilization and what we call ideology. There has to be a distinction that has to be made between the two. So the critics, for example, say that back then people lived in tents and they rode camels and so on and so forth. So a call to Islam means a society that is against progress, that is against science, that is against technology, and so on and so forth. And this type of understanding actually shows the ignorance of some people of what Islam is all about. And all you have to do is study the history of Islam to realize that Muslim civilizations were the people that were foremost in science, foremost in technology. So Islam is not against these things. So a civilization can change over time, but our ethical standards, as I mentioned, our human values, they will remain the same. Our belief system, our noble character, our worship of God, these things will not change. Now, in the Muslim belief, the definition of good and what's good and bad, what's justice, what's the purpose of life, what is ultimate happiness, these are things that are God-given. These are things that are set by God. And man does not simply construct his own values. And we see that when that is the case, when a man is constructing his own values, that there is no measuring stick, right? There is no frame of reference you can look at. So what was bad 20 years ago is good today, and vice versa, right? So what is good 20 years ago is bad today, right? Based on human beings constructing their own values. And for the Muslim, this is not the case. Our standards, our values are set by God, and these do not change based on the changing human situations and the changing civilizations. Now, that doesn't mean, as I mentioned, that we don't adapt to the changes that are going on all around us, but basically we cannot sacrifice our values in the name of progress. Right? That's something that we have to take into mind. So in the light of all these changes around us, Islam is still applicable in the times that we live in. Because a religion that is true is a religion that does not go against useful progress. When the Quran speaks, if you read the Quran, it always addresses those people who know, those people who have wisdom, those people who understand, as the Quran says. So, in this, as I mentioned, in the same token, if in the name of science, in the name of progress, in the name of modernization, we're sacrificing our standards, our ethical standards, our human values, then that is not progress. Or if in the name of progress one is forced to adopt the values and the standards of those countries that have the most science and the most technology, right? That's also not progress. Not that those countries are all bad, right? There's good aspects and there's bad aspects. But the question is, how are you defining progress, right? How are you defining modernization, for example? So briefly, what I mentioned in this short session, Islam is not a religion that's against science. It's not a religion that's against technology and progress. And the history of Islam testifies to this. But we should note that our primary and essential values should remain the same. These do not change over time. And these cannot be compromised with the changing times and the changing civilizations. And as I said, that doesn't mean that we don't adapt to the changes that go on all around us, but that has to be done within a framework that does not sacrifice our ethical standards and our human values. So I hope I was helpful in answering the question, is Islam compatible with modern times? Please join me next time when we look at another one of those frequently asked questions about Islam and then give an answer with respect to it. Thank you and goodbye.